The Purdue Boilermakers with an absolute meltdown at Assembly Hall. The Indiana Hoosiers have a 27-point swing as the Boilers are now on a 4-game losing streak. We're going to talk about it all, lick our wounds, and try to pick ourselves back up off the mat on the Boilers in the Stands post-game show starting right now. Welcome back to the Boilers in the Stands post-game show. I am your host, Kraig Braggs Jr. Alongside me, as always, is Joe Jackson. Craig Bowers was unfortunately at Mackey Arena, or at Assembly Hall, I should say, for that absolute debacle of a game, embarrassment of a game, and I feel bad for him because I know it's his first time seeing the rivalry at Assembly Hall since he was a little kid, so he's going to have to wear this one on the chin, unfortunately, in person. So I'm going to get right into it now. And I'm going to take Joe off and give myself the solo screen here so he doesn't have to be a part of what I'm about to say, because all thoughts expressed here in the next 3 minutes are of just my own. And this is my biggest takeaway from this game. There is a lot that the Purdue Boilermakers hold responsibility for, especially over this 4-game losing streak. No question about it. There's a lot of toughness that they got to get underneath them. There's a lack of mental toughness and physical toughness that are part of the reason why they are blowing these first half leads over and over again. But for just today's game, the Purdue Boilermakers cannot beat both the Indiana Hoosiers at their house and the refs. This was the Hall of Calls, and it started right out the gate, 2 minutes into the game, with an Indiana player kicking Caleb First right in the groin, clear as day, called a foul on the court, reviewed, and then determined there was not only a flagrant 2 to be thrown out of the game, but a foul at all. Play on. Okay, game on. Let's play. And then as the game proceeded, as we've seen many times at this house, and that's fine. You want to call it, then call it like that. You want to swallow the whistle, so be it. But this wasn't a two-way street, in my opinion. Purdue was playing 2 different teams today. And time and again, IU is able to play much more physically without getting calls, whereas Purdue is getting called for things that I don't believe met the same standard that IU got to play under. Now, once that occurred, Purdue did everything in their power to add on to this avalanche as the Boilers' 12-point lead to start the second half completely evaporated. Kaufman-Renn playing completely out of control. Braden Smith just throwing the ball away. There's plenty of blame to go around in that regard, but it starts with the refs seeing a player get kicked in the groin and not calling it for what it is. And there is a precedent that's been set throughout this season. Even if it's unintentional, players have been thrown out of the game for same actions, which I believe today's was intentional. And then ends at the end of the game with Kaufman-Renn getting a flagrant foul on a reviewed call that you could argue may or may not be also a cylinder consideration. So this was not called straight, but also not the reason when you lose by 15 that you can solely blame it on the refs. So to get to what Purdue's responsibility of this is, the toughness aspect of this team has completely evaporated. All the defense that we've seen and lauded while this team found their way to number 1 in the Big Ten just a couple of weeks ago is gone. And now they have just continually shown that lack of toughness physically and mentally and have blown lead after lead after lead in the first half. And then cannot pick themselves up off the mat in the second half. As I mentioned, Kaufman-Renn all over the place. As soon as he's getting the ball, going in, not waiting, out of control, not giving himself the best chance to score. Today, he's been great all season long. Today was one of his worst games of the season. Braden Smith, same thing. Throwing the ball away twice in a spot where you just cannot add to the problems happening. And so now Matt Painter pulls you from the game. Matt Painter, by the way, love Matt Painter. Love this team. So any criticism you're hearing today from me is from a place of love. In my humble opinion, and I know Matt Painter would vehemently disagree with me, I watched him throughout the game challenging the refs about each and every call that was just absurdly just indescribable. They're like inexplicable. And I see him debating with the refs on whether or not the merits of the call actually made sense. Get a technical foul. Get thrown out of the game. Take the chair that Mike Woodson is sitting under and throw it across the court. At some point, you got to flex your own resume and your own stature in college basketball and let the refs know that this is not what's going to happen. If it is, then I'm going to let you know to a degree that we're going to have the TV broadcasters bringing it up because I'm getting a technical foul here. And that might be the most meatball take this program's ever had, which is why Joe's not on the screen right now, because I don't want him to be associated with the nonsensical things that are coming out of my mouth. I'm pissed off, 1,000%. But at some point, somebody has to say something. Somebody has to say something. And so Purdue's got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of reasons why they lost this game today. We're going to talk about it all, but I just had to air the clip here to start this broadcast. And I'm sure there will be a lot of people that tune into this and say whatever they want. I don't really give a damn. This game did not surprise me one bit whatsoever. Every year, IU plays Purdue as if it's their Super Bowl. If IU played every game as if they were playing Purdue, they'd be a damn good program. And instead, they're not, because this is the only game they take seriously every single year, and especially at their house. This is what they do. The only thing that surprised me in this game was that their fans did not storm the court for once. So maybe they gained back a shred of integrity from what I've seen before, where they act like they have never won a game like this in their lives. Bravo, you didn't storm the court on a team that has now lost 4 in a row and might be in the top 20 come Monday morning. That's all I've got. I'm done ranting and raving. I'm pissed off. Joe's going to have a lot to deal with here today. Kraig may or may not join us later. Joe, the floor is yours. I apologize.
No, I'm going to be honest. I think people probably need and want that more than anything I have to say. And yeah, I mean, we'll just transition from there. It brought a smile to my face. You made me smile, which whatever your goal was, you made me smile, and I appreciate that, Braggs. Going from there, there's like 2 to 3 things that I think this all comes down to, and really none of them were X's and O's to me. Now there is X's and O's stuff. We can talk about it if we want. We can draw it up on the board later if we want, or we can just kind of talk and do what we got to do here. But mainly, number one is just toughness. Just toughness. Like, at some point, you have to be able to handle a little adversity, handle some pressure, and still convert. And it has gone all out the window in these past 4 games. At some point, you just kind of have to buckle up defensively. Yes, your scheme is designed to help. Yes, and that is because, right, in general, Purdue's defense, they don't have great individual defenders. At some point, you just have to do it, or else it's not going to happen, and results aren't going to happen, and wins aren't going to happen. Right? I know there'll be a lot of talk of adjustments out of the second half and all of that. I don't think there was any adjustments. I don't think there's any I don't know if there's like a ton of blame even for Painter of like, oh, why didn't, second half adjustments in that. Purdue just didn't want it as much, and Indiana wanted it every single bit, and Purdue didn't. And you have that, you have the toughness, and Purdue just nowhere near match for those final 20 minutes. And I don't even think it was necessarily they tried to, just taking their foot off the gas. It was just IU straight from the jump. Purdue never matched their intensity that final 20 minutes. And then on top of that, you will not find a bigger Braden Smith fan in the country than me. I promise. I have been in love with his game ever since I watched his high school tape. I have been all like, you will not find a bigger Braden Smith fan for me. He's my favorite college basketball player I've ever watched. He has to be better. He is 2 of 8, 5 assists, 6 turnovers, and 2 turnovers to start the second half, just from being rushed. 5 second half turnovers in general, and it's been a little bit of a theme. And maybe it's legs, although he sat a little bit more this game. It's 12 turnovers in the past 2 games, and he's had 2 of his last 3 games where he didn't score double figure points. He has to be better, and then the other superstar TKR has to be better. He's 4 of 11, 4 rebounds, 5 fouls, and 3 turnovers. Those 2 combined for 17 points on 6-19 shooting, 9 turnovers. The other guys came to play today. For at least on the offensive side, Lawyer was awesome, 20 points on 6-9 shooting. Colvin, if we're taking one positive, it's, hey, maybe Colvin can start stringing this together. I think he shot well in 2 of the last 3. Heidi knocks down a 3. Your superstars play like superstars, you win this game, regardless of toughness, intensity, anything of that nature. Your superstars are the superstars, and they have to play like it. Every team needs them, but especially the way this Purdue team is designed, they need them to play better. And right, like some of it is just simply play better. So I really do believe so. Some of it is like, and we know I love the X's and O's and the strategy, and I'd want to just keep learning and all that about all that more. At some point, you got to execute. Like at some point, you have to just be able to withstand it and execute and play well. And Purdue did not do that for the final 20 minutes, and they played, their worst half in probably. I mean, I'm sure there was a worse half than what I'm about to say, but like the worst half since the Miami game, and what was that, 18-19, or something, or 19-20, 2021, one of those years, 2021. Yeah, like you just got to play well. That's going to be summarized. You like at some point you just have to simply do it.
No question about it. I'm not. I know a lot of people are only going to hear the ref aspect of my rant, but there's no question the Purdue Boilermakers hold a large responsibility for adding to the meltdown that was occurring. It was bizarre to watch the start of the second half where Braden Smith gets a rebound underneath the rim, and somehow it hits the bottom of the backboard, and now IU gets the ball, and it goes from where you're up 12, you're about to take the ball back down the court, have a chance to start extending the lead, and then all of a sudden it's a 7-point game. You had an opportunity, if you get that rebound, to maybe push it to 14. And in the blink of an eye, it turned to a 7-point game. And that's when Braden Smith started turning the ball over. That's when Kaufman-Renn started getting way too sped up in his process, where he gets the ball and it's like trying to be deliberate, trying to be, assertive and go right to the rim, but he's going right into players where it's a high difficulty, low percentage shot, even if it is close to the basket. And so then there was, like I said, it just continued. At one point, Miles Colvin gets called for the smallest little, foul on one end as they're doing like a screen coming around, and Miles gets a little bit of a hip, and now they're calling that. And that, like, it just snowballed, and you saw the frustration. And so for anyone to say, I get their toughness has to step up, but I had no issue through these last 3 games against Michigan, Wisconsin, or Michigan State, where we don't talk about the refs on this show ever, even when there's times where we could. Today was so egregious, in my opinion, and I am happy to sit through all 40 minutes of that embarrassment again with anyone that has a technical and upper level knowledge of what is and isn't a call, and go through it one by one. Because honestly, for me, from my standpoint, having watched basketball my whole life, have been playing basketball my whole life, I can, for the most part, feel fairly confident on what is and isn't constituting a foul. And I can also find that gray area and accept there's going to be times where you're going to let them play. Today felt to me where it was just so over the top. So if you want to be of the criticism that these players need to stop complaining and get back on defense and stop every time there's a timeout running to Painter and pleading your case, because you know Painter, what does he say every time you see the clip? This game's not for the weak. Quit crying about the refs. On its surface, I agree with that principle. But there is a line. At some point, you can only do so much. And how much did you see in the last 10 minutes of the game where these guys are just, they just started smiling? Because what can you say? What can you say? You can only complain so much. They're not giving you the call. And you can say, okay, we'll just play better. I think that there's some truth to that. And I also think it's unfair in some regard, because the game has to be played straight to some level for you to have an ability to execute, like you said, Joe. So I just think there was times in this game where they couldn't execute. I mean, Braden Smith goes to the rim and gets fouled as he's going up with the ball. They don't call it. Fletcher Lawyer in the first half gets laid out as he's going in for a layup. Don't call it. To me, there was so many different instances, and by the end of the game, your head is spinning. The only ones where I think I'd like to go through them and see were some of the ones where Kaufman-Renn gets in there, because man, he really just dusts it up and he gets himself into the action where you could say it's a foul, but you could also say Trey is the one initiating the contact. So I think that there's probably gray area within those. But then when you go back to the other end of the court, I just felt like that they were getting some of those calls on those and ones that really extended the went from a 12-point lead for Purdue to all of a sudden they're down 11. Like, that was a huge momentum shift. And while Joe's great with the stats and Joe's great with the X's and O's, there is a momentum aspect of this game that you can't quantify on paper. And it seems, especially in this rivalry at their house, time and again, I have seen this play out where the momentum just is undeniable and unstoppable. And there's like nothing Purdue can do from an X's and O's standpoint to stop the tidal wave from happening.
Yeah, like it goes that second half. Purdue's at their base, right, is just, okay, worst comes to worst, Braden Smith can get a semi-tough jumper that he's going to knock down a good chunk of. They couldn't get to that. Like they couldn't get into anything that they wanted. And so now they have nothing they can really truly rely on to just kind of calm them down, right? They aren't forcing turnovers, so they can't get out and run. They're not rebounding awesome, so they can't get out and run. Although the rebounding, I guess they technically win the rebounding battle in the end. But and then just in the half court, they just couldn't get into whatever they wanted. I do think IU did a fantastic job. I'm going to give them credit here for this, of like, they went a lot of times, especially when it was more of a designed like TKR post up grab kind of survey, they switched to zone. Like, they would be in man-to-man defense. TKR would get the ball in the post and they would switch to a 2-3 zone. And so I think there's stuff like that threw TKR off, threw off his timing, threw off his rhythm. That also puts a lot of pressure on other guys knocking down shots. And I think not the biggest, but one of the biggest differences between the first and the second half, beyond just turnovers and handling pressure and all that, is like, first half, Colvin's 2 of 3 from 3. Heidi's 1 of 1 from 3. CJ Cox, I mean, he has a bucket. Lawyer was 2 of 2. Like, the other guys were still, and I know Lawyer isn't necessarily grouped in the other guys category, but they're knocking down shots. And that doesn't happen in the second half, even in the limited opportunities guys have. And so, right, you can't get into your looks. IU had a pretty good defensive game plan, and then the other guys don't make shots in the second half. You can't defend, and that's how you give up a 12-point lead and lose by 15.
Yep. Tamaz in the chat says, yeah, it spiraled. Tamaz here in the adds on here in the chat saying, I knew it was over when Braden almost made the steal, but passed it to Lil for the layup. I don't believe it was called an and one. I think it was just a layup. But to your point, he did make the steal, Tamaz, and then he threw it away. And guess what happened before he threw it away? He was fouled. Watch the play. It goes to the ground, and he gets knocked from behind as he's going down and collecting the ball. It's a loose ball foul by definition, and they did not call it. All right, and then he throws it away. I don't know why he threw it there. How do you throw it underneath the other team's basket? Throw it to the other side if you're going to do that. But at the same time, if I'm being fair to my criticism of Braden in that moment, he got fouled. And Painter said as much as they went to they called a timeout as soon as that happened. And Painter's talking to the ref that that's a foul. Throw the Gatorade bucket if all the chairs are locked up. And I know that's not Painter saying. I know it's not. Bring him on the show. I'd say the same thing. We had him on our show a few years ago, and I brought this up to him about being more vocal with the refs, and he gave a good answer about why he doesn't. I respect it. I have the utmost respect for Matt Painter. He's one of the best coaches in the country. This 4-game losing streak in today's game doesn't change that. The other thing we'll talk about too is IU and Purdue these last few years with Mike Woodson, who's on his way out here in Indiana. Mike Woodson has done a good job against Matt Painter. He's done a really, really good job. And so I think they're 500 against Purdue in Mike Woodson's tenure. So that's in the golden era of Purdue basketball. You're talking about some of the best teams that Purdue's ever had and some of the best players Purdue has ever had. While meanwhile, IU has had some not great teams here through this era. So I'll give Mike Woodson all the credit. He's given Matt Painter problems here.
Yeah, it's been a good game plan of getting guys downhill, physical defense. Like they've just been able to match up, and you get into these rivalry games, and sometimes all that stuff just gets thrown out the window too. Of like, it doesn't matter what your team has been. It doesn't matter what your team is going to be. All that matters is those 40 minutes, and rivalry games are just so unique in that aspect where it really doesn't matter. Like you got to go play hard for those 40 minutes, and Purdue did not do that today.
No, they did not. We're going to talk about a lot of things. We'll get confirmation of whether or not Kraig Bowers will join us from Assembly Hall. He said no, Joe.
Correct.
Okay, Kraig will unable to make it. It's a little different when you're in Assembly Hall as opposed to Mackey Arena. So he's going to do the post-game press conference with Matt Painter, Mike Woodson, and the players and get some content from that perspective. I'm sure he'll post the full-length interviews to YouTube later on. So shout out to Kraig for the coverage he's doing there. We're going to take a quick time out and I'll try to calm down. I know that most people that have watched this show, certainly this year, are not used to the meatball just completely exploding into flames. So for those of you that prefer the more analytical and balanced approach that Kraig and Joe normally give you, I will say it again. I apologize, but this is how I feel right now. You're always going to get my authenticity, whether I'm right or wrong. I'm fully open to a debate on some of the points I'm making today, but obviously I feel strongly about them. So this is how I felt. I wanted to start the show for myself, but I certainly don't speak for Joe or Kraig when it comes to how we assign the blame, because I know that Kraig, before we take this break, just to give you an idea of where his headspace was at, I know that he had some thoughts throughout the game about toughness, and I'll read one of his tweets just so we can get some of his feedback in the game. And he said to this regard, let me just make sure I get this right. Just a complete meltdown. No other way to put it. And he even said at one point in the second half, 3 points to 6 turnovers in the second half. I mean, for the majority of the second half, they had more turnovers than field goals. So not good. And then he also added on that for whatever reason, Woodson has been to IU. He has been good against Purdue, and that is the truth. So maybe this win for IU gets them into the tournament. It's certainly, if the season ended today, this probably would be enough to push them back into the tournament. I think there's still more season to go. And so we'll have to see how that plays out for them, but certainly a huge quad one win for IU, who gets their first home win since early January. We're going to take a timeout, give a shout out to our sponsors. And when we come back, I'll try to calm down.
Purdue graduate and Lafayette resident since 1999, Michelle Rainey has 10 years of full-time experience working with buyers, sellers, and real estate investors in Greater Lafayette and many surrounding areas. If you need to buy, sell, invest, or even relocate, call Michelle to schedule an appointment to see how she can help you accomplish the real estate goals you have. Your home or creating an investment portfolio will likely be the most expensive transactions of your life. Have the experts with Rainey and Company at Keller Williams on your side and let Michelle navigate this process to make it easy. Call or text 765-532-3415. That is 765-532-3415. Appreciate Michelle sponsoring the show, and not just this one, but through ones throughout and helping sponsor what we are able to do. So shout out them. Appreciate the sponsor. My bad.
Oh, you're good. We're less, it's because we both care. So we're both producing the show behind the scenes, and we appreciate everyone tuning in. Please hit that like button. We appreciate everyone hanging out on a tough loss as we try to regroup and find our way through the rest of the season. Obviously, chances of winning a 27th Big Ten championship are gone officially. A 4-game losing streak will do that. We'll talk big picture, I think, later in the show, because I have some thoughts in that regard, but I don't think that would be appropriate. I think right now we need to focus on the game itself. I also don't think it would be appropriate to immediately go into the very few positives from this game, and I think there are a couple. So Joe, I'll let you kind of lead this one because I'm clearly still in meltdown mode. So if I lead it, I'll just go back to yelling. And I think at some point we need to balance this thing out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to start defensively. Although in totality, the defense wasn't awful. The offense was honestly like, you have a normal offensive game, you probably still win this game given what the defense did. But it's still, the defense is what it is at this point. And another game, 44 points in the paint for Indiana, another 13 at the line. So 57 of their 73 points came either in the paint or from the free throw line. IU is 19 of 21 at the rim. So last game, I believe it was 20 of 28 20 of 28 Michigan State field goals came at the rim. Today it's 19 of 28. So that's 39 of 56 field goals in the last two games that have happened against Purdue have been at the rim. Their interior defense has been atrocious, just awful, and that's right. That's the easiest thing to point out. In conference play, Purdue is dead last in defensive 2-point percentage at 28.8%. I'm trying to pull up, and I'm sure I'll get to it at some point, what their 2-point percentage has been. Defense has been since January 1st, and it can't be good as well. Guys have to be in the correct rotations. Guys have to be physical. And just a lot of that stuff is not happening there. Yeah. Since January 1st, sorry, the number's small. I had to scoot in to see it. Since January 1st, per Bart Torvik, Purdue teams are shooting 60% from two against Purdue. That is 363rd in the entire country. And for reference, there are only 364 teams in the country. The only team they are ahead of, there's 363 this year. So they are dead last in defensive 2-point percentage since January 1st. Now they combated a little bit with teams taking a lot of threes in that time span, right? They are one of the higher defensive 3-point attempt rates, but the drop coverage that they play hasn't been good. TKR and First have both really struggled in that. And then you get so many mismatches where guys can get in the post, guys can drive, and either your help isn't there, or your help is too small, and teams can just get what they want on the interior against Purdue.
Well, let me ask you this, because maybe this is board worthy, maybe it's not, but the clear observation for me in the first half to end it, as Purdue really started to extend their lead, is how well they played defensively on that high-low and how they were making sure with Caleb First and Trey Kaufman-Renn that they weren't going to be able to throw it in, where they're forcing now IU to take 3-pointers that they were not making. And then in the second half, I don't think the initial run that tied the game was necessarily, the bigs just dominating Purdue. But then as the second half progressed, then all of a sudden they went back to their bread and butter of the high-low, but yet Purdue didn't seem to be able to execute the same defensive, philosophy that got them that 12-point lead in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, I can go through a little bit.
Let's do it. The board.
Right. It all comes down to you have to be in the right spot defensively. Number one, there are very, very few good individual defenders on this Purdue team. Their defense of success comes from being a cohesive unit, being in the correct spot, rotations, and things like that. And so, right, you look at something like a high-low, where I have to draw it up first. Riveting stuff right here. Right, where if IU's going high-low, I use X's, Purdue's O's, and whatever that thing is. Purdue's going to front the post. That's what they do, and they want to provide backside help. You saw the one time TKR throws his hands up in the air after I think it was Balo scored because First wasn't there. The other issue, though, is now, okay, even if, say this doesn't work, you cover this well and things like that, and say this slides over, now this would probably step into like a pick and roll or something, is now this guy can seal and you can drive baseline. And the other thing is, like, there's so many times where this help right here is Braden, Fletch, CJ, Jakari. There's only so much they could do. And right, like there's only so many things that Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer can do to help protect the rim, even when they're rotating weak side. So one, you got to be in the right spot. And then two, there's just times where they're in the right spot, but it doesn't really matter because, right, your point of attack defense, it starts here. This guy's trailing. You're going to be in drop coverage. That's bad. Like, not drop coverage itself is not bad, but their drop coverage hasn't been good. Guys can drive baseline. There's just so many options. And Purdue is like, what made Purdue's defense so good in part was similar to what IU did today, where you just pressure and you force teams to have to really be pushed out, and you don't allow those drives, because once that happens, that's when bad things happen. Like, for example, we'll say here, drawing it up again, say the ball's here, right? And if Purdue wants to force sideline, Purdue wants to do that, and then they want to force baseline. This drive, you have, this help here, this guy's going to dive. That's good. That's great. Good defense. And there's a few times that's happened where also Purdue has really been getting into issues. And I think it's not just this game. I think it's this 4-game losing streak is, okay, skip, this guy will dive. You have the skip pass here. And like, maybe this guy closes out again. That's good. It's after it's okay. First rotation's good, but now you're scrambling. Cause now I know this is a little confusing with the drawing at this point, but right, ball swings. In theory, now it's this guy having to close out, or it's this guy, ball swings. Now, like, this guy's having to fly, and teams are just able to keep moving. And then it might not even be a catch and shoot. It might be a pass and now a drive. And again, I know that drawing is not the simplest to read because there's 3 steps in the head, but like, the point is you have to be in the right spot because Purdue has limitations from what they can do defensively. You have to do what you can in those spots still, and sometimes Purdue isn't in good spots, advantageous spots, even if they're in the right spot. Then you got to rotate out from there in terms of making the correct rotations, but it can't be just one. It has to be multiple. And IU, I felt like, could just, right, they could go into the post and multiple times they kick out from there because Purdue just isn't in the right spot, or Purdue's in the right spot. IU still has an advantage. Swing, drive, continue and repeat until something happens. And it's just been a common theme. And someone might say, well, why are you running that defense? And it's because if Purdue wasn't, the results would be that early stretch in the year where, right, they lose Marquette, Penn State, A&M, Auburn, close games against Mississippi and Maryland. Like, that defense there was what they switched away from, where it is a little bit more conservative, try to keep guys in front, things like that, try to limit some threes. that didn't have success either. So now they're just at this point where you have this defense that worked for a little over a month. Like, it was awesome. It was one of the best defenses in the entire country. And now it's just fallen off these last 4 games. And it goes back to my initial rant of like, at some point you just have to do it, right? Like, Purdue and Painter, I'm sure, will make tweaks and makes adjustments, but at some point, Caleb First and TKR have to wall up at the rim well. At some point, CJ Cox and Jakari Harris and Miles Colvin really, really got to defend on the perimeter. At some point, Brain and Fletch have to be able to physically do their jobs on the defensive end.
So I would say then the only question I'd have to a solution is, I felt like at points in the second half where you're like, why can't we get a stop underneath the basket? Well, I'm looking at the lineups, and Tariq Kamal in the chat, he's made a couple points here that I started that I'll bring to this discussion because I agree with him. He said, I just hope Matt Painter learns from this run. Please don't play TKR and First separately for long periods. Playing them together is what brought us to a huge winning streak, and playing them separately loses. He adds on, yes, where he said, I texted my brother and Purdue friends on a group chat at half and called it. Said we will only win if Purdue keeps TKR and First in together for the exact reason being presented now on the board. And I agree with him. At one point where it finally became a eureka moment, I'm like, why can't they get a stop under the basket? And then I'm like, why is only Trey Kaufman-Renn in the game? Or why is only Caleb First in the game? They both need to be in the game. And to your point, Joe, when they had this, renaissance of this defense being all the way up to one of the best in the country, they were both on the floor together. Caleb First became a starter from what that wasn't the case before the 2025 calendar year switched. So do you believe that that's part of it, is the rotations not being lined up?
I think it can be. The issue is foul trouble. And I know first half it wasn't like they only had one foul apiece, though. There's only so much Painter can do, right? And I don't have the exact rotations from all past games up, but like I have one pulled up from the Iowa game. In the second half, TKR and Caleb First each played like 17 and 18 minutes, and they only played 5 separate minutes. I think Painter would love to do that. I think Painter hasn't been able to because guys are getting in foul trouble, and right, even that, and it's been such an issue the past 3 games that Painter had to literally he had to pre-manage foul trouble, and it didn't even matter because, and I know blowouts can get a little,
but that's the point. It didn't even matter because they lost by 20. So you have to recognize what's happening and the avalanche that's ensuing and say, okay, yes, both my bigs have 3 fouls, but if I don't put in the 2 guys that are able to stop what's happening underneath and put them in and say, play good defense or get fouled out, but I'm not losing this game because one of you 2 aren't out there. Like, I'm going to go out swinging instead of going out saying I'm going to protect my foul trouble for a game that ended up not even being a contest by the end of it.
And TKR still ended up with 5. Caleb still ended up with 4, and probably could have easily gotten a 5th in there as well. Like,
that's the answer, right? Is even if he did that Trey Kaufman-Renn just fouls out earlier because he's had trouble all year long staying out of foul trouble and being disciplined in moments, especially in moments of frustration.
Yeah, and that's where the TKR ones are just tough because so many of them are just so like, it's like, all right, moving, was it 2 moving screens today? He had the early offensive rebound, defensive rebound.
The last moving screen one was a moving screen. He put his knee out. He didn't get out there in time, and he stuck his knee out there. Now, again, on the other side of the court, that was happening all game. So, like, what constitutes a moving screen and what doesn't? Because both sides of the court, it wasn't even. But I didn't have a problem with them calling it on TKR at the end of the game because it was a moving screen.
Yeah, and I do think as I've watched a little bit more of these, is like I do think a little bit of it is on Braden on those. Like, TKR has to be set in right, we don't know exactly what they want to do. And Braden wants to go and kind of, Anthony Weinbrenner brings it up. Like, Smith's not always waiting for TKR to get set. And I talked about it, I think, on the last post-game show of like, I do understand to a degree where you trust TKR to be able to make the play and read what Braden's doing because they have such a good two-man chemistry. But at the same time, like there's got to be times almost where Braden knows like, hey, I just have to let TKR get set here, and we'll work from there. Where I know if it was ideal, Braden wants TKR to just kind of slip a lot of these. He's going to still get downhill, and then he's playing 2-on-1 and get those pocket passes. But sometimes if TKR is not, if it's known TKR isn't slipping, you got to let him get set. He is too valuable to this team. And then also TKR can't pick up. I don't remember all 5. I know he had 2 moving screens. And I remember the first half foul where, he shoved Rice out of bounds. Love the aggressiveness on the boards, but he's just got to be smarter in his spots going for the rebounds.
We had Anthony Weinbrenner. He agreed where he said, I feel like Smith is not waiting for the screen. And Brandon Mauk also added on, why doesn't Smith use the screen better? He needs to get close so TKR doesn't have to move. And so I'm curious from your perspective, because certainly in this 4-game stretch, we are seeing a different Braden Smith than we've seen for most of the year. And I think now his Big Ten Player of the Year accolades are certainly at risk. I think there's still a high probability he wins that award. Not that that's what matters right now, but at the same time, it felt like he was a lock to be Big Ten Player of the Year. And now there's, obviously Tanjay from Wisconsin's trying to have something to say about that. They have a tough loss yesterday. Regardless, my point is Braden Smith is playing not at the same level he was earlier. So 2-part question, because I've been kind of foreshadowing the concern of fatigue because the amount of minutes he had been racking up throughout the year. Not to do the I told you so tour yet, but you guys did try to tell me that wasn't going to be a problem. It somewhat feels like a problem now. And if it's not a fatigue issue, then his pace of play seems to be different than what it was before. If I'm going to talk about Trey Kaufman-Renn being way too sped up in his process, it feels like Braden Smith's pace is not exactly where it was when I felt like he was the maestro of college basketball just 2 weeks ago.
No, you're 100% right, and I do think there is some fatigue setting in for sure, as with everybody at this point. But there definitely is for him, and just it just felt like the timing and he just hasn't been able to like settle into games yet. And some of it is just defensive pressure that he's been facing. Some of it is they're not truly being a secondary guy that can relieve him, at least on the perimeter. Lawyer and CJ can do bits and pieces, but even them for the most part, they kind of need stuff created for them. It's just felt like he's just been out of sorts, which is so unusual to see from a guy like Braden Smith. We've seen what he's done all year long, and that's where right, even with the screens, and why doesn't he want to get closer? Well, sometimes he really likes just getting off that screen and getting basically just using almost like a brush screen and just going quick, because then he can catch the defensive big off guard a bit and then get some stuff there. But there just hasn't been that explosiveness, that extra, right? Braden has had that extra level, and I know he's not the most athletic guy, so it's not common for maybe this phrase to be used for him, but Braden still has that extra gear in terms of just that he can just play in different ways than everybody else, and he's not been able to get there. And some of it, obviously we don't, I don't know the psyche of Braden Smith. Some of it has felt even just as simple as focus and just right. And that focus could probably easily come from fatigue and things like that. Braden Smith just got to get right. And you got another, 4 or 5 days off before UCLA. If we're talking big picture, I'm kind of fine with them losing early in the Big Ten tournament at this point. Once again, I agree. Wouldn't be mad at a first round loss. Look competitive, lose your first game, get some extra rest, and get ready for March. Because I know I'm going to get laughed at for this. I still fully believe this Purdue team can make a deep run. I fully think they can. But the opposite side of that, right? I'll talk about their ceiling there. I fully recognize now that their floor is hey, if they face a physical, 13 seed or something like that, they could lose round 1, 2. But I still think that ceiling is there for this team.
Yeah, and we'll certainly get into some of the big picture stuff here in a little bit as we're trying to maneuver through some different thoughts on the game. I certainly have thoughts in that regard as well, and so I think there's some things that we can take and look ahead. But I also want to point this out too because we appreciate everyone in our chat. So please hit that like button while you're hanging out. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube if you haven't already. If you're watching on Twitter or Facebook, obviously, we always appreciate your support and your viewership, but it goes a long way if you head over to the channel on YouTube, subscribe, hit the like button. It just helps grow what we're doing, and certainly sending the link along to your friends and family, and just kind of spreading the word for us. This is what we do, and we all have different jobs outside of this, and we just do this for the passion of the team because we love this team. We love this program. And I'll also add this just to kind of make this point because Tamaz has been in the chat here all the whole this whole game here today, and for most of our post-game chats. And he says, "Hey guys, this is getting a bit too negative. It was bad. We need to learn from this, but we need to support the guys on the team." And I just want to make this point because I just think it's important to note for some of you might be new to this show here today because you're pissed and you're looking for a place to find an outlet and some therapy through a tough loss and a 4-game losing streak. But we are always going to bring an analytical approach to the game. Joe is certainly always going to not just show you the problems, but try to come up with solutions on how things can get better. You're going to be hard pressed to find bigger advocates of the Purdue program here than me, Joe, and Kraig. If you watched the end of our last post-game show against Michigan State, Kraig advocated just how much this program means to him and all Boilers fans, and why a 4-game losing streak doesn't define, the character of any of these guys or Matt Painter or any of that. So no, it's all good. Tamaz saying he meant the commenters. Didn't mean us. Well, and that's fair, but I'll just also speak for us because the show's been negative. I've been crying about the refs. I said Matt Painter needed to get a tech at one point. We're being critical of Kaufman-Renn and toughness and Braden Smith. And I even at one point I was sitting in my my man cave here downstairs with my friends, and I jokingly said that the AD should let them walk home from IU. I was so pissed off. So and this, mind you, is a team where one of the assistant coaches is one of my very good friends. So just to give you some context, it's from a place of love, and we're all frustrated, and we're always going to root these guys on, paint them in a positive picture, but we're also going to be critical, and we're going to be tough when we need to be. We're not cheerleaders. So it's a little bit of a blend, and you got to thread that needle here as we're the Fans in the Stands podcast in a lot of ways. But also we want to give you the truth as to what's going on. And we're feeling it just like the rest of you. We're frustrated just as much as you guys are. They're frustrated as a team and as coaches and as a program. So I think that I have faith that things will get better even this year. But that doesn't change the fact that they're still staring UCLA down the barrel on Friday. Not a gimme win. And you're going to be in front of your Mackey Arena crowd, and they need a big time effort to kind of get back in a good spot and get the fan base, in a good spot as well. So Friday's going to be a big one at Mackey Arena.
Right. They are 19-9. They are 11-6 in Big Ten. Big Ten title hopes done. If you can pick up the last 3, you have 2 at home, UCLA and Rutgers, and at Illinois. And Illinois, Illinois fans are down worse than Purdue fans right now. I promise you. Maybe not this exact second, but give it 5 hours, and I would agree with my statement then. They are 3 winnable games. You win those 3, not an easy task, especially given what Purdue has done. You're 14-6. You're 22-9 in your first year without Zach Edey. You're going to probably be anywhere from probably 4 or 5 seed, probably a 4 or 5 seed if you win out, right? There is still hope for this team. There's still life for this team. I'm going to keep coming back to it. At some point, you got to just do it, right? I can talk all day of Braden Smith and TKR are awesome. And right, I do think that they'll turn things around. You got to do it. And you got 3 games left to do it before we talked about the Big Ten tournament that they're obviously going to try to win. I think as fans, it is fair to have a debate about how much you actually care about it. Unless you really think you're going to win it, I don't think it's the worst thing to lose. And so I'll just throw that in there.
We've been of that mindset with the Big Ten tournament for years now.
Yes.
Like,
was not mad when they lost last year.
Our program isn't a big fan of the Big Ten tournament.
At the Big Ten Media Day, Painter didn't like say it, but he basically, there was like, I forget the exact comment. I know I tweeted it way back, but it was basically like, it was the more or less was along the lines Painter said, like, yeah, our guys last year just like were mad about the Big Ten tournament that it existed, and they just really wanted to get to March. And now different circumstances, right? Coming back from the FDU loss and all the hopes, but there was Painter and Purdue are never going to try to lose a game, but I think if you're ranking their goals, it's, probably Big Ten championship, Final Four, big gap, Big Ten tournament championship.
Correct. And a couple years ago, they win the Big Ten regular season championship, and then they win the Big Ten tournament, and both take a lot of effort to do that. And then they lose to a 16 seed in the first round, right? That's how that season went. And so if we're going to spin zone here, this is going to be the first time in a few years that they don't have a shot to win the Big Ten regular season championship. So maybe, I doubt it, but maybe there's a different approach of the stress you put on these next 3 games. You're certainly trying to win them because your rankings you're falling in your rankings. So certainly not saying that, but like, as opposed to if they had a chance to win the Big Ten championship, that's where I think then you're playing Braden Smith 40 minutes a game, things like that, where you're putting the real stresses on your guys to try to go for 27th Big Ten championship. Now the Big Ten tournament, same thing. You look at last year, they win the Big Ten regular season championship, and Painter basically, without telling anyone, just called off the dogs at halftime. Like he in a lot of ways,
like Edie and Smith were sort of hurt, and
right. So they lose, and then they go on to go to their first Final Four since 1980 and their first national championship, or the first in a long time, and it was a great run. So we're not big advocates of the Big Ten tournament championship. So it'll be interesting. But that being said, you say if they win their next 3, they can be a 4 or a 5 seed.
I would guess so.
And I hate to bring this to the table, but we kind of have to at this point. They play UCLA and then
Rutgers and at Illinois.
Rutgers and then at Illinois. Rutgers is at home, correct?
Yes.
UCLA and Rutgers is at home. So what's the gap here between potentially a 4 or 5 seed versus what's worst case scenario? I'm not going to say lose all 3, but just give me best
worst case scenario.
Okay, yeah, best case scenario, worst case scenario. Give it to me so I understand the gap we're looking at here.
Yeah, and I'll preface this with saying I'm not the big all my bracketology stuff just comes from different Twitter accounts I follow. Like our guys, Delphi Bracketology. Go give them a follow. Big time of year for them. Love talking with Tonsoni and love what he's doing over there.
Oh my God. If I saw Brian Tonsoni right now, I might wrestle him to the ground. And I love Brian, but that's how pissed off I am. Brian, bring it on. I will literally drive to your house right now and fight you.
I think ceiling, like win these 3 and then maybe you win 1 or 2 in the Big Ten. Like I still think the ceiling's probably a 3 seed at this point. Right. Especially just given how tight it is and there isn't a ton of separation between those teams. I think a 3 seed's probably your ceiling. If you win the Big Ten tournament, maybe you can creep back to a 2, but right, we just talked about, is that worth it? I don't know. Floor, lose these 3, lose first game of the Big Ten tournament. Again, I'm not 100% certain, but I would guess floor is like a 7 seed would be my guess. I can't imagine it getting lower than that, but especially just given how the bubble is right now, and like Indiana's in the tournament was where the bubble's at. 7 seed feels like the absolute floor, and if I were to guess, I would just pencil Purdue, and it's somewhere between a 4 and a 5.
Okay, cool. Glad I asked. I want to throw up. and then in terms of the Big Ten tournament, are they still in line to have a 2-round bye?
No, they're a game behind or a half game behind Maryland and Wisconsin right now. Maryland still plays Michigan and Michigan State, one of those on the road. Wisconsin still plays at Michigan State, although their other 3 games are pretty cupcake. UCLA is also 10-6, and they are up 3 right now on Ohio State. So I have the game up as just in the background. So like, right, the Purdue, in terms of double bye, Purdue's next game is vital. When you got to win that one, then you're sitting 12-6. You're kind of hoping at this point, right? Your hopes have flipped from you wanted Maryland and Wisconsin to win these games because then it meant Michigan and Michigan State losing, but now you're rooting for Wisconsin and Maryland to lose. Purdue holds the tiebreaker over Maryland. They won't over Wisconsin. So it's 100% still in play. And honestly, if they win their final 3 games, I would be shocked if they were not in a double bye situation. But it's hard to say, win your last 3 games when they just lost 4 in a row.
Correct.
Like it's not great. That's just where it's at.
Not great. So we got into some big picture stuff. I also wanted to get into what the positives were from the game, and Tarek also added exactly where I'm going with this. He said, on a positive note, I thought Colvin and Heidi brought their onions today. And I do think through the last couple games, albeit very frustrating losses, that the one bright spot, and especially today, is that it seems like Miles Colvin and Cam Heidi are starting to come out of it. Not just starting to come out of it. Miles Colvin seems to have completely come out of it. He looks comfortable, in rhythm, and confident. And he's doing a lot of really good things out there. So let's start with Miles Colvin, what he did in today's game, and talk about a little bit of what he's been able to do to kind of turn it around.
Yeah. He goes, he has second highest points on the team at 11 points. He's 3 of 8 from 3, 1 of 2 from 2, with the 1-2 being like a 19-foot pull-up. He is 6 for his last 15. Not big sample size, but 6 for his last 15 from 3. That's 40%. I think, right, before I mentioned, hey, I still think the ceiling is a deep tourney run for this team. I still think, I don't think a Final Four is out of the scenario. Again, I got laughed at it for last time, and I don't think people understood actually what I was saying. The ceiling is the Final Four. I'm not saying they're going to get there. I'm saying that I still think when they are at their best, that they are one of those teams that can make it. If we are going to look at positives, which I think we should, I do think if Purdue ends up in the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four territory, I would not be shocked if we look back on this 4-game losing streak and be like, oh, that was almost a turning point of times, because you really started to see other guys get going. And Colvin's example number 1, where he has started shooting the ball better. He's also, especially that first half when Purdue went on that big run, I thought his defense was awesome. I thought he did exactly what Purdue needed from him defensively. Heidi's also starting to get it going a little bit. He is 4 for his last 7. Again, not big sample size, so not guaranteed to sustain, but you're looking at positives. Those are 2 there. And even just, right, CJ Cox, he got some minutes running point guard today. I don't think it was like a fantastic CJ Cox game, but he's starting to get some more of those reps. Jakari is falling out of the rotation a little bit, but he has shown what he can do. So now you're getting these pieces that's like, okay, Purdue doesn't need every one of them to hit every game, right? Assuming Braden and TKR are going to be Braden and TKR, which I do think they will get back to form. You need Braden. The formula is still Braden, TKR, a decent to solid game from Fletch, and he, with knowing that, hey, he can go off at any given game. So those 2, some of Fletch, and you need 1 other guy per game to step up offensively. That is the formula. That has been the formula. That is all they need. And then the other guys just got to play good defense. And so I don't know if I'm, confident, I would say, in Colvin and Heidi at this point, but it's more confident than I was 2 weeks ago. I know CJ and I know Jakari can get buckets at certain times, especially CJ can just kind of go on those tears. And right, my full focus for this team is switched to March. It is, how do you get ready for March? What do you need to do to get ready for March? And it's having those guys at your disposal, right? You still want to rely on Braden and TKR because they are 2 of the best players in the entire country. But what happens like in March, if it's a game like this and team goes on a run and takes a small lead, you need something to be able to answer, right? It's win or go home. You have to have something, and now you have guys that in theory can do it. And Colvin, Heidi, CJ, Jakari, like that is the biggest positive and the biggest takeaway, I think, on that side for just what this game and what this stretch has been. Is like, okay, maybe we'll look back in a month and be like, oh yeah, Colvin and Heidi got going. That was big. Purdue ends up in the Sweet 16, Elite 8, or whatever.
I agree. Oh, you can't prove that because I wasn't on screen.
That's fair.
You can't prove that. You can prove that, but the chat can't prove that. I agree. I think that's the spin zone silver lining is these guys are starting to get going, and that's building their confidence. And then I think the other aspect of the spin zone, and we can continue to talk about different personnel on the team, or Fletcher Lawyer, did he have a good game? Did you think he didn't have a good game? I thought he had a good game at one point, but then they lost. And then I just felt like no one had a good game, and I want them to walk home. So it's hard to do the spin zone on the leaders of this team, especially the big three, being like, oh, they had a good game. Well, no, they lost by 15 when they were up 12. So it's a hard sell to say good game, but at the same time, I thought he had some big time plays, and we need more of that out of him, more big time shots. But just speaking to Miles and Cam, it's good to see their confidence get going. You need that depth. You need those different options. You need that athleticism. And then I think the other aspect to just back you up on this whole idea of what their ceiling is versus what their obvious floor is. Anyone has the ability or vulnerability to lose in their first round matchup. I don't care if you're a 1 seed or any seed can lose in the first round. Okay. So that's everyone's floor. And obviously Purdue knows how to lose to every double-digit seed in the tournament. So we know this. I don't need anyone to tell me that they can lose in the first round. We've seen it. It's awful. But I agree that their ceiling is certainly interesting. And I do think that this 4-game losing streak, as hard as it is, 3 of the 4 being on the road, all 4 being tough environments, there's no days off in the Big Ten. And while IU is having a bad year, right now as it stands, they're a tournament team.
Yep.
And so it's not as ugly of a loss as if they're not a tournament team, which is still not off the table. But overall, like I'm saying, they've lost 4 straight, 3 of 4 being on the road, 3 of 4 being teams in the top 15 in the country. And then the IU game being a team that's now a tournament team by definition. And also for Purdue and IU, this is how it is when you go to IU. I don't care what the record is. So it's their one of their toughest games of the year, no matter what. And they split with IU on the year. IU nearly beat them at Mackey, just for context. So I just look at this and say, it sucks. I'm pissed. I could rail against this team for another hour, but I also can look on the other side of the coin and say, I understand Matt Painter is a great coach. I understand that Purdue is a great program. And I know that these players are good players and they have the ability to play much better than what we've seen these last 4 games. And maybe something as bad as a 4-game losing streak, and somebody in the chat can help me out. I don't know the last time they lost 4 in a row. But whatever it is, it just happened, and now they have to do some soul searching. And if you're saying that toughness is the biggest common denominator factor of these last 4 losses, then let's see some self-realization of that for these players. Because while they haven't shown toughness in these 4 games, I do think they have toughness within them. I've seen some fans on Twitter say this is the softest team they've seen in years. I don't agree with that. They have toughness, but they are feeling sorry for themselves, getting pissed off, blaming the refs as much as I'm blaming the refs. And they got to lock in. They got to play better. They got to get their confidence up, and they got to get that toughness back that they had when they became the number 1 team in the Big Ten. And if they do that, and they get a good draw in the tournament where the matchups are favorable, this team can absolutely still go on a run. Kraig brings it up all the time. I bring it up all the time. If you go look at the team that made it to the Elite Eight with Ryan Klein and Carson Edwards and Matt Harms, that team had trouble with toughness at times throughout the season. I can remember being very critical at times of Matt Harms, being too worried about getting a call or not getting a call. And I can remember some real lulls in that season where things looked bleak and didn't look like they were going to do anything in March. They lost to Minnesota in the Big Ten tournament, but then they went on a run. They got hot. They started knocking down their threes at an insane percentage, which certainly is an anomaly. But at the same time, I think this team and this roster is much better than that Elite Eight team that almost made it to a Final Four. So that's just my long roundabout way of saying, Joe, I agree with you. And I think that while it looks dark right now, sometimes it's darkest just before the dawn. And maybe this team will find that light when it matters most when they get to March.
And I feel like Purdue teams in the past, or fans have always been like, not upset that they're winning Big Ten titles, but like, hey, like basically just being like, hey, this is built for Big Ten play, and this roster is not built for March. Like, I think this roster is built more for March than most of the other teams. Also, like, if we're drawing parallels, if I remember correctly, and Carson and Braden are two vastly different players stylistically. Pretty sure Carson was just I'm looking at his stats. In the last 3 games before going to the NCAA tournament, he was 7 of 33 in those 3 games, right? With 9 turnovers. And again, they're completely different players in terms of on-court product, but like, you can have these bad stretches and still be one of the best players in the country and still turn things around. And I will say, right, in my opening statement, I kind of railed on Braden and you have to be better. I only say that because I know how good he is, and he is the best point guard in the country to me. He is still the 3rd best player in the country to me. I also have 100% faith that he will turn this around, right? He's had 6 turnovers in each of the past 2. I think he's going to figure it out and just understand and get back to being the Braden Smith that we know. And once that happens, like if that happens and you get a little bit of this carryover from the roster being a little bit better and TKR gets back to normal, like things are fine. You got to do it now. And at this point, it's also just a little bit of like, they have to find a way to beat UCLA. And I don't even care if it's, 10-9 is the final score. Like, just find a way to win the game, because at this point, I feel like, right, it's a little bit of, you talk about momentum and things that you just got to get the monkey off your back and just be like there's just this cloud now of like, okay, we're on a 4-game losing streak. If we lose this one, now it's 5. Like, they got to just go in and handle business at home against UCLA. Also, like, I don't expect the crowd. I don't expect the crowd to be out of it at Mackey on Friday, but like, if there is any, like, they're not going to be out of it.
Yeah, they're not going to be out of it. They're going to be irritable depending on how the flow of the game goes.
Yeah.
Because there's this angst building up. Like, we're all feeling it. Yeah. I'm having a meltdown for an hour and a half today on our postgame show. Like, we readily see that. So you're going to feel that. But, Purdue starts fast every game. They'll be up 10 at halftime, and the crowd will be going crazy. And then when the second half starts, if they continue to let their first half lead slip, that's when you'll start to feel the angst and the irritable and the tension. It'll rise because it's palpable when you're at a stadium with a fan base that cares as deeply as the Purdue fans care and are engaged in what's going on, on the court or in the field of play. And so I think the other aspect of this where you're like, they just got to get the monkey off their back. Jeffrey Sloan, kind of had something here from Facebook saying, is it just me? I think this team has no killer instinct. They seem to let too many teams off the hook. They came out in the second half like they didn't even want to be there. I know it's hard to win on the road in the Big Ten, but I just feel like they just accepted that. Am I thinking wrong? And no, They
I
have
disagree
trouble.
a little bit.
Okay.
The only part I disagree with is I think Purdue got absolutely blitzed to start. That first 2 minutes, I don't think it's a Purdue didn't want to win type thing. I think it's just they got blitzed. And then from there, I agree with it more of like, well, like you got to, at that point, right, you just got to figure out a way, and they didn't.
Right.
So,
but I will say killer instinct in terms of two things. They don't know, like through their winning streak, they were stepping on teams' throats and beating them by 20, 25 points. But now through the losses this year, especially in these last 4 games, they've lost the killer instinct of when they go up 9, 10, 12 to then extend it to 16, 18 to where the margin of error when you enter the second half is much thinner and then makes the other team play much differently. And then you start the second half, you go from a 12-point game where you're about to get a turnover, go the other way, maybe extend it into the teens. And then before you can blink, it's a 5-point game and now it's tied. It's like before you could even react, they had flipped a 12-point deficit. And with like 17 minutes to go, it was a tie game. And so that's one part of the killer instinct. And then I think the other aspect of the killer instinct, and I've talked about this throughout the year, they haven't had too many games where it's close at the end. And through the Zach Edey era, it felt like every game came down to the final minute. And they won the majority of them. And that takes a certain level of experience because you have to know how you're going to win at the end of games. And the reason they were so successful is they had the cheat code in Zach Edey, acknowledged, but they also knew what they were going to run when the going got tough. They were going to go to this, and we're going to run this. We're going to get it into the post, and this is what we're going to execute to win this game. Right now, this is Braden Smith's team. It goes as he goes in a lot of ways, but it also goes as TKR goes. And so there is somewhat of an identity tug of war of what they want to do at certain times in the game to execute in the most pivotal moments. Are you going to do the thing where you just let Braden freelance and figure it out? And freelance is probably an unfair word. They're doing these things by design, pick and roll, get downhill, drop off, doing different things to try to get somebody open. But it is a lot of when they're at their best, Braden is just kind of maneuvering to find those angles. But then there's also the other aspect of it where you're going to let TKR go to work. And TKR at one point today was like, that's what I'm going to do. But it wasn't his day today. And he did not have it. So that's where I think they have somewhat of an identity crisis. When the going gets tough, what are they going to do? What do they know they can execute at the highest percentage degree to guarantee that they're going to get a bucket? And so that being said, going forward, they've got to figure that out because they haven't played in too many close games this year. And everything gets close when you get to March. And you got to know what you're going to do when you get to that point.
I do think part of it too is like their go-to thing is 2-man pick and roll, Braden Smith, TKR pick and roll. And it's been a little bit of like, well, Braden and TKR are throwing the ball all over the floor. And now it's, what do you pivot to? And that's where I go like that. Again, that first half, the other guys did a good job of contributing. And in the second half, they weren't able to bail them out. And I don't know if you, right, I don't think you expect them to bail Braden and TKR out for 40 minutes. Outside, I guess Lawyer did, but right, that's part of it too. Is just like if Braden and TK are having those games, one, they can't have this game on the same day. You can live with one and the other being fine. Like you can still figure out a way. It can't be both on the same day. And when that happens, like it did today, like option one, Braden Smith pick and roll. Option two, TKR post up. Neither of those were there. And then it's like, okay, well, what do you go to? And Lawyer to me was the only one comfortable dribbling the ball today, like in the half court and creating. I thought Lawyer was really, really good. Colvin was good shooting the ball. Fletcher felt like the only one that the pressure didn't bother him. And I know he doesn't always have the best defenders on him, but he was the one that was getting downhill and getting to the floaters and pull-ups and knocking down a couple big shots and getting to the free throw line. Like there's there's only so many ways I can say Braden Smith and TKR just got to be good.
Yep. Kraig Bowers from the press conferences here a little bit ago as he starts to head back to West Lafayette. He adds in that that these were some of the comments from Matt Painter in the post-game press conference. Matt Painter basically said bad decision making by TKR, not passing out of double teams. So that's one. So I agree with that. We talked a little bit where it felt like he was just way too sped up in his process, and that seemed abundantly clear to Matt Painter as well. He also goes on to say bad point guard play from Braden Smith, too many turnovers. Very rarely do you see Matt Painter send Braden Smith to the bench after a couple mistakes, and that happened today. You know, he's certainly taken him out at times for fatigue, but I think at that time he took him out because of the mistakes he's made. And we've seen a lot of times throughout the last couple of years, because Braden Smith has started in every game he's ever played in his career at Purdue. Very rarely, especially here lately, has he pulled him. He kind of lets him find his way through his mistakes. That was not the case today. Lack of composure by the team, Matt Painter pointed to. That certainly was something we talked about. And then he ends it with making sound decisions defensively after a couple guys hit threes, playing out on them, which let them get into the paint when they wanted them shooting threes. And I agree with that. There certainly was a point in the game in Casey Bartley, who does a fantastic job covering the Purdue Boilermakers. He made that point on Twitter as well, where they were starting to fall for like pump fakes on the three. They were getting way too overly aggressive, way too anxious, and they falling for pump fakes on threes. And now they're getting into the lane and getting and ones, you know, and it's like, no, let them take the threes. That's what got you to this point. But they just were in scramble mode so hard that they just could not find their composure to understand, don't jump, don't fall for the fake, and let them take the three.
Yeah. Focus, fatigue, like all of it coincides with one another. You got to know the scouting report. I mentioned it. There's back-to-back times in the second half where Galloway gets a cut at the rim off of a post feed, and then the next play, Goody knocks down a three. And I don't remember specifically when it happened, but it felt like a turning point, and it felt just like scouting report personnel type things. Like Braden goes out to Rice instead of trying to take Galloway on a cutter. Rice is not a good three-point shooter. I know he knocked one down. And then the next play, TKR tries to play the gap, but like I forget who was up top. It was not a real threat. And Goody, the best shooter by far on Indiana, one of the best shooters in the conference, was weak side corner wide open.
Yep. And twice Braden tried to play the gamble, where he comes around the backside on the big to try to strip the ball and completely left his man. And one of them was with Luke Goody in the corner. And then there was another time on the other end where he completely came off his guy. They ended up missing the three, IU, but he was in those two instances specifically. I made a note in my head that he was gambling a little too hard on plays where he has found ways to get turnovers before, but in those instances did not.
And I'm just looking through. And so since December 29th, right, you almost have to talk about this Purdue team in two parts: before the defensive switch, post defensive switch. So post defensive switch, they have it. I think this is more correlation, not causation. But there's maybe a little truth to it. In every single game that they've won, Braden has had 2+ steals in every single win except for one, which he had one. In games where he has one or fewer steals, they are now 1-5. He has 2 combined steals in the last 4 games. Like, I think it's not only just him, it's a testament to the Purdue defense also, just like not knowing the reports, not being able to force turnovers. And I don't want to say not know the reports because I'm sure they're well prepared, but like within that moment, not playing to the report. And just making mistakes that way. And now you're not forcing turnovers, and this defense needs to force turnovers to be good.
Yes, absolutely. As I almost fell for the muted mic, but I did not. I'm very proud of myself for that. See, I read that. That's understanding my scouting report and making sure that I execute properly and not talk while my mic is muted. Blake Widmer's in the chat. I know he's like 20 minutes behind on the show, but he's still contributing with his thoughts in the chat. He said Kramer talked about guys lacking joy. They don't seem to be enjoying playing ball. Well, yeah, they're on a 4-game losing streak, but at halftime, Fletcher Lawyer was letting the crowd have it. He hit a big time 3 to end the first half, and they were barking at the crowd. Miles Colvin's clapping in a dude's face, playing some pretty good defense, even though when he clapped, the guy got by him, but he missed it. But I saw a confident team to end the first half. Braden Smith hit a big 3, was showing that confidence that we've been used to. And I was so impressed with how they were down 6 to start the game, 19-13. It might have been more than that, but they went on a huge run. I think it was an 18-2 run, and it was predicated on, great defense and knocking down shots. Braden hits a 3, Fletcher hits a 3, Miles Colvin hits a 3, Cam Heide hit a huge 3 to spark that at that point. Trey Kaufman-Renn just doing his thing on the hook shots. Everything was cooking. And it is one of those things where we have seen through every one of these 4 games that for whatever reason, they blow a first half lead, whether it's right at the end of the first half or to start the second half. They call it in football the middle 8. Coaches are starting to refer to the final 4 minutes in the first half of a football game and the first 4 minutes in the second half of a football game as the most pivotal minutes in a game. Everybody focuses on the last 2 minutes of a football game, but it's those middle 8 that really define teams that win consistently and lose consistently, because there's just a swing of momentum. Obviously with football, one team starts with the ball to start the second half, so that has something to do with it. I understand that. But regardless, it's just one of those, everybody talks about what the starting lineup is. Well, IU didn't start 2 of their starters today. The starting lineup doesn't matter. The end of the game is certainly crucial, and everybody always points to how you're going to play at the end of the game. That goes without saying, but very seldom do people talk about how important it is you finish the first half and start the second half. And Purdue is failing miserably at that here, especially in this 4-game losing streak.
Yeah. And right, like I don't know. They get blitzed
it's
to
weird.
Start that second half.
It's weird.
I don't
it's
think they
hard
changed,
to explain.
I don't think they changed game plans from first to second half. I don't they just didn't execute. And it's a worrisome sign that it's happened for pretty much 4 straight games now. Not pretty much. It has happened for 4 straight games. And look, I think if we notice it, I think the Purdue staff's also going to notice it, and I'm sure they're going to be on it. And it just got to be UCLA. That's where my head's at now. Prepare for March, and the best way to do that, you just got to figure out a way to beat UCLA and just breathe for a sec.
100%. We've had some super chats in here today, and I apologize. Obviously, I should be better than that, but probably should be pulling these up a little quicker and sooner. When I do my Bears shows on CHGO Bears, if you watch what I do on CHGO Sports, which is another show where I get to rant and rave about a team that drives me insane. Purdue's been the fun team I cover, but right now it hasn't been as fun. But typically we do our super chats at the end of our shows on CHGO Bears, but we probably should be getting to these a little quicker on our program, so I apologize for that. So I'll get to some of these super chats right now. Chris R, $4.99 super chat. Unifying the points today. It's tough to play tough. It's tough to play tough when your tough play is whistled. Like that loose foul on Braden for trying to gain possession. I agree with that. I believe he's talking about when he came to the floor, got possession, and then threw it away underneath IU's basket. He was fouled on that play. That's of my opinion, and I agree with Chris R. Thank you for the super chat and the support. TD Ransford brings in $1.99 super chat. Need
to
read this one for me because I don't know what he's trying to say here.
Need to install a zone. Bigs are foul prone. And we talked about that a little bit last show where it's like, I'm not anti-zone, but also if you look at a lot of zones that generally work, Purdue does not necessarily have the personnel for that to happen.
Okay. Absolutely. And Kraig just entered our chat and said, y'all are still going. Yes, we are, Kraig. If you're on your phone and you want to jump in, you're more than welcome. I can send you the link to your phone if you'd like. If you want to give some thoughts, but I'm sure you're on the road and driving. But yes, we're still going because I spent the first 30 minutes ruining the reputation of this show by completely freaking out. So I did apologize a few times through my rants.
Hey, I want to, because with the way this game was going in the second half, I looked over at my girlfriend and was just like, I don't want to do this show. And then you came on, you did your rants, and it felt like it just kind of opened me up a little bit. So I think it was a needed rant because it got me loose a little bit too, and then I've enjoyed doing the show.
Well, I've gotten a little more used to this as I've done this now full time, covering sports for a few years. I mean, I totally know how you feel where you just don't. There's games like this year when the Bears lost on that unbelievably awful Hail Mary to Washington, where I honestly felt like I was going to pass out. I was so upset. Like, that's how much I wear this at times on my sleeve. And sometimes it's hard to pick your bootstraps up and have to go to work and do a show. And there's been times where we've done these Purdue shows when they lost to a 16 seed and you got to come on and do a post-game show about it. And it's not easy, but that's what we do. And it's fun.
Yep,
we are lucky to be able to do this and be credentialed and be able to go to games. And so we're always just going to give you the raw reaction that we give you. And sometimes it takes a minute to kind of collect yourself though at times. And so I totally feel that. So
especially these away games where we go live pretty quick. It's once I'm like 20 minutes removed, I'm like, okay, like I'm good. But that initial point is just like, man, it's tough. But do love doing the show. Don't want to.
No, of course, no. I
don't love doing this.
No, of course, that's a human aspect. Like, but you can't duck your taco, as some of my friends would say. And we show up and celebrate the wins. And that's the thing. When somebody said earlier, like, and I know he's talking in the chat, but like, we don't do that many negative shows. We've been covering Purdue since this has kind of started through the golden era of Purdue basketball. So like almost every show we do is fun because they win and they're great and they have great players. This is the first time that for us, as me, Joe, and Kraig have done this show where we're on a 4-game losing streak. There will be, hopefully we never go back to a day where we're covering this team and they're at the low point of their program, where you're covering a team that's at the bottom of the Big Ten. I don't think that will happen under Matt Painter, but those things at times happen and you got to cover it. And we're kind of new to this thing. So it makes it a little, tricky when you have high expectations and you're on a 4-game losing streak. I totally get it, man. It can be hard. And we want nothing more than to cover fun teams and fun games. And for us to be able to have covered Zach Edey's career and Purdue kind of get to this golden era and all the way to the Final Four and national championship last year, where we were standing on the court before the national championship tipped off. Like, that's because of you guys that watch this show. And that means a lot to us. And this season still has a lot to be said for it. And
sure,
we can still have a lot of fun to finish this year, but it sucks right now. That's for damn sure. Final super chat that we got in here from Craig Winningham, $5 super chat. 40 IU points in the paint with 9:30 to go. He also asked, why doesn't paint consider zone? So you just answered that, Joe, but it is to the point of these last few games, the efficiency rate by some of these guys, 2-point percentage and right underneath the bucket, like it is automatic with Purdue's defense really having a tough time stopping anything when it comes to post play.
And against, you have to put it in before the game. I don't think you probably want to run 2-3 zone on the fly, but against IU, it was a team at Michigan State, even where it's like, in theory, it makes sense. I think if you went to it, I would have viewed it how I viewed the Berg minutes today, where I tweeted, I was like, hey, I don't mind seeing Berg. Now, Berg was not good in those minutes. You go away, it didn't work. But that's kind of how I would have viewed it. It's just like, well, you kind of gotta figure out something. Maybe you try it. If it doesn't work for 2 minutes, go away. And that's probably the most likely outcome. But because like I don't have confidence the zone would work, but at the same time, it's what's going on right now isn't working. Gotta get back to forcing turnovers. This team has to force turnovers soon.
Yep.
They just have to.
Definitely. And for clarity, Chris R says his super chat was on the race to the loose ball. That was also interesting where it looked like in live time that Braden certainly was like trying to clear out. So it went out of bounds and it was a foul on him. And when you slow it down, you watch the replay, it does kind of look like IU initiated the contact on that. So I mean, whatever. That one, if you're going to talk about the fouls I had an issue with, that one's kind of down the list, but that's because there was a plenty. I'm sure I'm not sure how Kraig would feel about how much crying about the refs I did to start this show, but you know what? I don't care, Kraig, because you weren't here to start the show, so you can't stop me from crying about the refs for 30 minutes. Probably more, if we're being honest. Yes, Kraig, I will read your stupid comment that I starred. Thank you very much. Where he says, Greg is prepared for this moment better than us, Joe, as a Bears and Cubs fan. Boy, do you have no idea, brother. Like I said, very lucky. I was a bricklayer for 20 years, and now I talk sports full time and doing these Bears shows, Chicago Bears coverage and Chicago Bears postgame shows where I really, I can't wait to cover a fun Chicago Bears team, because if you think this Purdue fan base can be toxic at time, and they certainly can be pretty tough, Chicago Bears fans are brutal, and they're very mean to the messenger when it's the team we should be mad at, but they kill the messenger when it comes to Chicago Bears fans, and it can be tough. But again, not complaining, it's just a reality. And so this year was very hard. And so were the last 2 years before that, as they were two of the worst teams in football. So that's it. Whatever. No more complaining about what we do. We have fun with it. It's a lot of fun. Brandon Bogue says here in the chat, I'll still take a team of Boilers than a team of misfit transfers that have to be paid to come to our university. Boiler up. IU still sucks. All right. I love it. Yeah, we got a few more here. Tarek is saying the raw venting is much appreciated, Greg. I'm glad. I'm sure for some of you, I'm always kind of especially with what I do with Bears, you either love me or hate me. Some people just want to hear the balanced analytical X's and O's that a guy like Joe gives, or with football, same thing, or Kraig, very balanced, gives that 1,000 feet view perspective that's always appreciated. And then this is what I do. I'm going to speak from my heart and scream and yell and be passionate and cheer loud and cry harder. That's what I do. So you either are going to love that or you're going to hate it. And that's just who I am. A few other people were chiming in. Brutus saying, love the rant. We need to gain composure, but we're all pissed right now and need to let out the frustration. And that's what it is. It's therapy. We haven't had to have too many therapy sessions as Boiler fans on this show, but that's what this is here for, is some of that. So, Dave H says cathartic rant made my day. So that's what it is, man. Get your, get it all out. And then we can go on to our night and have a nice dinner with our family and not yell at them over this. Cy Logan says team is soft and the clearest first round exit I've seen in years. We talked about that earlier. Certainly not off the table to lose in the first round to a 12 or 13 seed. But Cy, I would just encourage you to kind of look at the other side of the coin and acknowledge there's a chance this team's light can come on when it matters most. Because the one thing we didn't talk about in terms of the aspect of spin zone of why things can go right in March, they have experience on this team that made it to a national championship last year. And when you get to March and now you've won that first round, now you got to turn around and play a team with only a day window to scout for. Then you have that week where you go to that next city. That sometimes teams with experience in that process win out just from that alone versus whether or not you have the better roster or capabilities. So I think the fact that Purdue finally made a deep run in the tournament and got all the way to the national championship, because that's what hurt the Purdue team that lost in, the 16 seed. They kept losing early on to early seeds. And so the experience factor of March, I think, hurt them just as much as, whatever other variables you want to consider of why they lost those games. So I think experience is on their side this time around as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that can't be overlooked. And Braden Fletch and TKR, that core has seen almost the highest highs of college basketball and the lowest lows. Like, they are going to be well prepared. They're like, I'm really hoping that in a month we just look back in this stretch and it's just like, man, that stretch sucked, but we'll still be celebrating some sort of Purdue success.
Yep. Corey Lesney chiming in. Appreciate you jumping in as always, Corey. Really comes down to toughness and defense. Both are non-existent. Agreed. Corey, appreciate your chat. This one I already pulled up. I just forgot to pull off the star. David Dillman. I think Painter is aware of Smith and TKR that are getting gassed under the weight. I've noticed Cox get some run at ball handling as he has earned some trust. Is that something Purdue is developing?
I think it's more, I mean, yes, you are in term developing it. But also I think it is a little bit more of just like, you're just brain just was rattled, it looked like, and you're just trying to let him catch his breath, get a breather, calm down, and get refocused, right? Because you're kind of hoping you can sit him for a minute or two, let him just for a sec, just chill, and then go back out there. Obviously, that didn't quite work out how they were hoping today.
Yeah, I don't know what Kraig's saying here. He says the issue in the last 4 games is that export hasn't shown through as toughness. What does that mean?
Effort?
Yeah, I don't know. He's driving probably, so be careful, Kraig. He might not be driving. I don't want to call him out for texting and driving. He might be sulking somewhere in an IU bar ready to pick a fight with Brian Tonsoni. And if that's the case, I highly encourage that. In fact, Kraig, before you get, he says experience. The issue in the last 4 games is that experience hasn't shown through as composure in critical moments. And that's certainly a fair point to be made. And that's also because, like I said earlier, Kraig, I don't know if you were in for this point, but I think they're still trying to find their identity in those critical moments of what they want to be. Certainly offensively, I think, it kind of, what you got to do defensively. You got to play tough. But offensively, like, who do you want to be in those critical moments? And like you said, they're a pick and roll team, but sometimes they just flat out throw it to the post and let TKR go to work. So there is other aspects of how they try to attack it. And I just don't know if they've completely found exactly who they want to be in critical moments. I think they have an idea, but I just don't think they've essentially found their bread and butter yet. Maybe that won't officially come until next year when these guys as a core unit are here for a full season and the big 3 are seniors. So we shall have to see. And Corey Lesney saying, who's stopping number 15 on UCLA? Is he 7'6"? My God. So you were talking about beating UCLA on Friday. So how are we stopping this dude who's 7'6"?
Yeah, I mean, we will have a preview out for sure. Also, shout out Corey. If there's a Purdue loss, you can guarantee he'll be in the chat.
And Bitcoin too.
Yeah, there's 2. I've never seen them in here after a Purdue win. But still appreciate them.
Calling you out, Corey. Love it.
Amara's 7'3". We will have a full preview out probably Tuesday or Wednesday would be my guess. UCLA is going to be a tough team. They are physical. I'm been watching the game in the background right now. They're playing Ohio State, which Ohio State is a soft team like Purdue. UCLA has 14 offensive rebounds and has forced Ohio State to have 7 turnovers. It's an ugly game. UCLA wants to play ugly. Mara's 7'3", and he's Matt Arms body build. But at the same time, Purdue hasn't been able to stop the interior. So it'll be a good matchup. We'll have a preview out. Just make sure to like, subscribe. And we will, be there to preview that. And we'll be here after the game Friday as well. It is a Friday game. So they have four full days off. I assume they'll be able to take. I assume they'll take Monday, like tomorrow, just completely 100% off. It would be my guess. Maybe even Tuesday, but probably Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, something light. Thursday walkthrough. Go try to get a win in Mackey on Friday. Also, like, I know that they did lose at home to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin's an awful matchup for them. But the other 3 losses have been road. You get two games in a row at Mackey, and it's like, all right, like this is the spot to you can just bounce back, turn things around, move forward, get ready for March.
Yeah, and when you talk about mental toughness, like look at Illinois last night against Duke. Like I know it's Duke. They look like they're primed for a Final Four run with Cooper Flag. But at the same time, Illinois is broken. If you think Purdue is broken right now, you can certainly make that argument. But Illinois is scrambling to figure out any sense of positivity right now. And so, those two teams are going to finish the year with each other. And if Purdue can get on a 2-game winning streak, you go into Illinois, and maybe Illinois seems to let go of the rope a little easier. I'll just say it like that. So maybe by the final game of the year, Illinois will just have had enough with the season they've had, which has certainly been a roller coaster. That's more spin zone for you and looking ahead. But yeah, get on a 2-game winning streak, go into Illinois and break their spirits again.
I think if we're, macro level and trying to hyper analyze and things like team chemistry or willingness to win in fights, you probably want Illinois to beat, you want Illinois to win their next game. Maybe they lose to Michigan, but like Illinois needs probably 1 win to guarantee a tournament bid. They're most likely going to get it, but I don't know if you necessarily want Illinois losing their next 2 and having to beat Purdue to kind of make the tournament as well. So if you're a Purdue fan, you almost want them to win the next one.
Right. Like IU today, where
yeah, exactly.
They're playing a game where it's an opportunity for them to get their resume to get into the tournament 100%. So that wraps things up. Kraig is right. It is officially Taco Bell time at the Bragg's residence. I will be dropping a 40 burger, $40 of Taco Bell coming up here very soon to just wallow in my depression from this game. But nonetheless, we appreciate everyone tuning in here today. Please hit that like button on the way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new to the program. Stay tuned for Joe and Kraig to give you a preview of the Purdue UCLA game that's coming up at Mackey Arena on Friday night. I will be down in Indianapolis starting tomorrow for the NFL Combine, and I'm going to do my best to make my way to Mackey Friday night from Indy. So we'll stay tuned for that. But we will be giving you coverage all the way through, preview show, post-game show as soon as the game ends at UCLA, as soon as the fans clear out of Mackey Arena. And so, yeah, today sucks. Last 4 games have sucked. But being a Purdue fan never sucks. And IU will always suck. And they can say whatever they want and chant whatever they want at the end of the game. But there's levels to this. And Purdue has bigger fish to fry for the rest of the year. And IU just won their Super Bowl today. Congratulations to them. And Mike Woodson can, have his swan song as he goes off. And IU
Mike
tries
Woodson.
extend Mike Woodson. Extend Mike Woodson, although he's done well against Purdue. Give him his credit where credit's due. Appreciate everybody. Kraig Bowers is adding in that post-game press conference videos are up, and that shows you just how long we have done this show for the second game
in a row. 45. Just me and
you. That's not surprising with how pissed off I was today. So I will take full responsibility for that, but also
I had some rants in there too.
Yeah, and we've had our chats been dialed up the entire time, so we're going to stick with you guys and get through it as best we can until we feel better about ourselves, and that is officially right now where I feel better about myself. So that being said, Midwestern goodbye aside, appreciate everybody tuning in. Hit the like button. Stay tuned for the content the rest of the week. Keep your head up, and always, always boiler up as well.